I'd like to welcome you today to completing your application for 2023-24 for the Fulbright Irish Awards, both student and scholar. And my colleague Paula Melvin will be on later to talk about students, and we'll be talking together at some point as well, and we'll take questions. So I'm just going to explain where we are on the timeline. Right now we're in August 31st is the launch, and from August till basically last week, we were inundated with queries, questions. Also, applications were being filled in. So a lot of applications are in progress. And as you all know on this webinar, we have literally 15 days to the closing, which is the 27th of October, 2022 at 4 p.m. sharp. And we're going to be very strict about that because we have to, give everybody the amount of time they need. And as of 4 o'clock on the 27th of October, we will not be taking any more applications for 23-24. So we will take questions regarding any specific questions you might have on actually completing your application. I have the guidelines here in front of me for the scholars, and these guidelines are very specific. So most of your answers to the questions are in these guidelines. There are 10 pages in my guidelines to scholars, and I think Paula's guidelines have similar numbers of pages. If you have any specific questions, we'll try and answer them here today.
That's it, exactly. So my name is Paula Melvin. So I'm the Senior Awards Manager with the Commission. And as Anthony said, he manages the scholars, whereas I manage the FLTAs and the students. And there's a few differences this year in terms of the awards and the requirements. So we no longer require hard copies as per the guidelines. So we simply need you to submit your application online. No hard copies are needed. As per the student specific guidelines and my FLTA specific guidelines, if you attended UCD, we do not need original transcripts of UCD transcripts. We want copies of those transcripts. Every other university, we can take the original transcripts for them as well. As Anthony said, we don't have long left for you to apply. You have 15 days. For anyone who's not applying for an FLTA award, who's applying for a student or a scholar award, definitely have a look at the sponsored awards on our website on Fulbright.ie, because it'll give you a list of all of those sponsored awards. So we'd urge you all to definitely have a look at those sponsored awards if any of those can be of an interest to you. I think Anthony wants to come back in.
Yes, there's a very interesting question there. Is there a project limit in words? There is no word limit for the project. Keep it succinct, keep it concise, keep it to the point. Don't use too much technical jargon, because you're going to be explaining this in the interview if you're successful to get to the interview. So there is no limit, but we don't want to have to, I'm sure the reviewers won't want to go through 50 pages. So keep it as succinct and concise as possible, and as summarized as possible. So the reviewers who are going through the applications will actually get some sense of what it's all about.
In terms of FLTAs and students, then, we would like the essays to be 2 pages each at least, maximum 2 pages each for those essays. But like Anthony said, keep it as succinct as possible. So there's lots of questions coming in now. So there's a lot of questions for scholars, actually, for Anthony more so than for myself. So applicants for the student award do not have to bring copies of the application to the Fulbright office once you submit online. That's your application fully submitted. Is that correct? Yes, for Fulbright student, scholars, and FLTA awards, you just submit online. You do not submit hard copies this year.
There's no word limit in terms of essay questions. Again, keep it concise, keep it limited. There is a question there about let me just go back to that one. Should the research statement be written for a lay audience or for experts in the field? I would say a little bit of both. Because if you go for an interview, then you'll be asked more about the actual technical aspect of the research statement. So try and keep it concise, to the point, and give a general summary. That would be the answer to that question. Would you agree with that, Paula?
Yes, and there's another one. Is there a specific template for the affiliation letter from a host university in the States? No, there isn't. They simply need to say that they're willing to host you as a student or a scholar. But obviously, the more the enthusiastic they are about hosting you, the better. But we do not have a standard kind of template.
Regarding the Creative Ireland Scholar Award and also Student Award, if you're applying for that, you'll get the general guidelines for either student or scholar, and you will be also sent a sponsor award document. That will be Creative Ireland. That will be filled in by them and you. So there are no specific guidelines for the Creative Ireland. It's just a sponsored award. We have sponsored awards and we have general awards. So that hopefully answers that question.
Again, a very similar question. Should the research statement be written for a lay audience or for experts in the field? At the review stage, there will be experts in your field who do not know you, who will not be from your host institution reading your application. However, at the interview stage, odds are the people on the interview panel will not be in your field. So yes, for a lay audience, if you like to use that term.
And regards the project proposal and citations, you can put down a CV. I think the CV, let me just see the length of the CV.
I think for scholars, we say maximum 5 or 6 pages, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, 5 pages maximum. So if you have, let's say you want to do 5 pages of your actual achievements and you want to put your bibliography and your works cited, you can put them on the 6th page.
This is my 2nd year applying for a student award. So just firstly, you're very welcome to do so. Quite frequently, people get a Fulbright on their 2nd or 3rd attempt. So delighted to hear you're a repeat applicant. And I'm wondering if it's okay to reuse a lot of the text from that application in this year's application. For example, the intro to my research proposal from last year is still relevant this year, and I'm quite happy with my personal statement last year. So I don't really want to make too many changes to it this year. That is perfectly fine. And next year you have, if you're a scholar, you have the opportunity to ask the scholars officer for feedback, or myself for student or FLTA feedback you can implement. So if you reached out to Sonia, who was managing the scholars last year, and you got feedback from her for a scholar award or student award during the correct time frame last year from me, I'd advise you to use those, kind of implement whatever suggestions the reviewer panel made last year. But yes, you can definitely apply again, and yes, a lot of your application from last year will still be quite relevant.
And regarding, there's a very interesting question there about, is there a budget from Fulbright for the host university? It really depends on, sometimes the host university will put up some money and Fulbright will add to that, but that will be between you and the host institution and Fulbright. So there's no definite answer to that question. It really depends on the host university, the area of study, and how we decide to fund both.
As a student, I'll be qualifying in psychiatric nursing. Is there a specific field of study that I could possibly study in the States if successful, as I know that this discipline isn't recognized in America? You're actually in a better position to answer that question than we are. There's thousands of 3rd level institutes in the States, and you're more of an expert in psychiatric nursing than we are. So what I'd advise you to do is to reach out to your colleagues in psychiatry and psychiatric nursing to ascertain, because obviously we're not experts in every single field and every single 3rd level institute in the States. But what I will say is that we definitely welcome diversity. So diversity comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. Obviously, we mean diversity of host institution in terms of geography in the States, and also in terms of we want a wide range of backgrounds as well.
A very interesting question about the project proposal and cancer. It's okay to specify which cancer, and obviously we know that there's all kinds of different cancers, so if that changes, that's okay. But give a general overview of what cancer you're going to be dealing with. Regarding accommodation, this is a huge issue this year. Depending on where you're going to live, if you're going to live in New York, you're going to pay a lot of accommodation costs. I lived in New York for 20 years, so I know exactly the problems that people are facing. We would also suggest that you go further afield, because maybe there's an expert in Iowa, or there's an expert in Wyoming, or there's an expert in North Carolina. It might be a much more interesting time. to go to those places. Obviously, there's a heavily weighted amount of colleges on the East Coast, you know, Boston, Massachusetts, and New York. But regarding the accommodation, that will be taken out of the stipend. So let's say you get 30,000 euros. If you're going to be there for 10 months and it's 23,500, you're going to be out of pocket because it won't cover it. So the accommodation expenses will be taken out of the stipend. So I would look into, you know, alternative colleges rather than just the New York, Boston colleges.
I love this question. Is it possible that Fulbright would ever negatively judge your application on the basis of the university you applied to being too small or too rural or not prestigious enough? We really do welcome diversity. So I'm in my 7th year with the Fulbright Commission. I'd love to see more people applying to North Dakota and South Dakota and to Kansas. Like, Fulbright should be a meaningful kind of cultural exchange and education exchange between people of the United States. It should not just be Dublin and Massachusetts or Cork and California. So we want to see as many rural and small institutions, but also say, for example, if you want to do a certain field of study in Harvard may not be the best or the most prestigious in your specific field. The expert in your specific field may be in Montana, maybe in Idaho. So we really want to see new institutions, and we really want this to be a meaningful exchange between all of Ireland and all of people from the United States. And on that point, I frequently get asked, can people from the North or Northern Ireland apply for an Irish Fulbright Award? If you have an Irish passport, you're eligible.
And that's a very interesting point that Paula makes. There are many colleges across the United States. There are also many community colleges across the United States. And one of the scholars this year is going to be teaching at a community college. So it's not all about Harvard, Yale. I went to Baruch College and I worked there for 10 years. Baruch College is the most diverse college in the nation, ethnicity-wise, orientation-wise, and more importantly, dialect-wise. There was 156 languages and dialects spoken at Baruch College. So it was the most diverse place I've ever been in my life. And I would absolutely suggest everybody in this call to look further afield, as Paula said. And it's nothing to do with prestigiousness of the college. You know, you could go to mom and pop college in the middle of Mississippi and probably get a fantastic experience and maybe meet an expert there. So don't think it's all about prestigious colleges. Here's one here. If you're applying for a scholar award, does your PhD need to be 1, submitted, and 2, awarded? In general, the PhD needs to be submitted before you can apply for a scholar award. If you're in your first year of PhD, you'd probably be going for a student award. A scholar is considered somebody who has already has a PhD. Is that correct, Paula?
Yes, or 5 years professional experience. So that mainly applies to artists. So if you are a pianist or a cellist or whatever type of artist and you have 5 years professional experience, you're probably going to be applying for a scholar award as well. So it really is like, but generally most people applying, yeah, it's you have a PhD. So if you're final year PhD student, you're looking at a scholar award. People are asking about deferrals. Fulbright was established in 1946, and as far as I'm aware, in the history of the Fulbright program, deferrals are generally not allowed. An exception was made for certain people during the Fulbright, during the COVID global pandemic, when institutions were closed and people could not travel. So as a general rule, if you want to take maternity leave, or if you're pregnant, or loads of other reasons, as a general rule, you cannot defer. So if you've heard of a Fulbright deferral, it was probably because of COVID. And then in terms of bringing dependents, you are able to bring dependents. Students and scholars may bring dependents with them. FLTAs may not. But we will help organize your dependents visas. Anthony and I will, depending if you're a student or scholar, and you sort your own health insurance for your dependents.
And regarding, there's a question there regarding bringing my son to the United States. It's up to you if you want to decide to bring a child. It's also up to you to figure out schools. We can send you, links to schools in the area, or you can Google it yourselves. But you'll also have to apply for visas for the children as well. And it's not looked upon negatively. It's just that there's a couple of more steps that need to be followed. I have one scholar currently going to the United States, and he's bringing his whole family. So he's bringing his wife and 3 children. All of them will have to go to the US Embassy to get their visa stamped or their passport stamped. He'll get a specific visa, they'll just get a stamp. So it's just a little bit more bureaucracy involved. Regarding 2 letters from 2 host universities, we would suggest that you go for one university and one host university. If you're going to go for a specific area, there's bound to be one university that covers that area. Would that be right, Paula?
As a general rule, the majority of people only go to one host institution. I have seen a few people go for more than one, but it is kind of a rarity. But it should make sense to you. And similarly, there's another question where my answer would be, it should make sense to you. For a visiting researcher type placement in the student award, can you apply between 4 and 12 months? Yes. So the minimum amount of time for a student award is 4 months, maximum 12 months. It's 10 months strictly for an FLTA. Will Fulbright look more favorably on funding a shorter award over someone taking a full 12 months? The length of the award should make sense, as in, so the amount of work you intend to do, the amount of research you intend to do in the States, it should make sense that it needs to take 4 months or 12 months. We don't discriminate between what amount of time, but if you're only going for 4 months, obviously there should not be a million things in your proposal, in your research proposal. And then similarly, if you're going for 12 months, it should make sense. You should have a strong rationale. But basically everything in your application should have a strong rationale. And just in terms of the community colleges that Anthony brought up earlier, we actually send an FLTA every year to Davison's Community College. So I'd love to see more community colleges in people's applications this year. That would be wonderful to see.
And there's a really good question there about how best can we explain our ability to represent the program and embody the values of Fulbright beyond academics. So you might have a brilliant project and you might have a brilliant written summary of that project. However, what have you done outside of the academia? What have you done in your world of leadership? What have you done in the world of sport? What have you done in the world of hobbies? Are you involved with charity? Do you go and feed the homeless on a regular basis? Do you volunteer at a dog and cats home? You know, these are very important things. These are also part of the Fulbright experience. Fulbrighters in the past, that's who we refer to them as, they've done much more things than just academics. They might have climbed the Himalayas. They might have climbed Mont Blanc. They might have climbed Colorado, the Colorado Rockies. So when they were out there before. So basically, what do you do outside of academia? That's very important, because if you're successful with the application and you go for an interview, most of the interview, probably 80% of it will be discussed about you as a person. And I'm sure a question will come up in a few minutes about the personal statement. That's got nothing to do with the academics. That's got to do with who are you? What can you add? What impact can you have as a Fulbright on society, on your fellow human beings? That's the whole purpose of this. You could be a wonderful academic and just study all day long. You know what? You might have a problem at the interview if you get past the application. So we want to know your personal life. What are you all about beyond the academics?
Great point. There's an awful lot of questions coming in about scholars. I haven't seen any questions about FLTAs, and there's been very few for students, but there's a strong interest here today for the scholars. I'd just like to point out that it is a generic application form that is used by commissions and posts all around the world. So use the same application form if you're applying from India and Iceland and Ireland and everywhere else. So that's the reason we send you specific Irish guidelines. So where the Irish guidelines differ from your generic application, please follow the Irish guidelines. For example, in the student guidelines, it states that you must list in the Irish specific guidelines what host institutions you want to go to. We are aware that the generic application forms tells you not to do this, so please abide by those Irish guidelines, and as Anthony said, please read those carefully.
Regarding including conference papers, I wouldn't put in too much. Just show that you're a published scholar, that you've presented at conferences. We don't need to know that you did presentations. Everybody presents at conferences. So there's no need to go into too much detail. Fill up as much as the form as you can, and you know, summarize it the best you can. And you know, remember, this is going to be reviewed by people who are very, very educated and very qualified. So they're going to know all of this already, that most people present and they go to conferences and there's peer-reviewed published papers, etc., etc.
If I'm a medical doctor and academic with a PhD, should I be best to apply for the HRB rather than a scholar award? The HRB is a scholar award, and if it makes sense to you, a lot of kind of pharmacists, doctors, people in that kind of background would go for the HRB award, all right.
Yeah, this is the person I spoke on the phone to today. And yes, the HRB is a scholar award, and the HRB is more applicable for a person with a medical background. There's a question there of the 4 different categories. We're not really going to answer that question.
Well, we do provide feedback every year to people, but it is kind of, the commission has some strict rules. So that is, as you kind of indicated yourself in the question, we cannot provide more detailed feedback than that, but we are delighted to offer feedback every year. Because
yeah, feedback will be offered, absolutely.
Can you speak a little bit more about the two-year home rule associated with the J1 visa? Thank you. So if you get a Fulbright award and you go to the United States on a Fulbright, be it for an FLTA, a student or a scholar rule award, there is a US Department of State rule in place, which means that once you complete your Fulbright, you must come home for 2 years before you can get a visa to live and work in the US. Now, during that 2-year period, you may travel to the US, you may go to a conference, you can get an ESTA, you can go on holidays, but you cannot live and work in the US. So that's what the 2-year home rule is. Traditionally, you've been allowed to undertake that 2-year home rule anywhere in Europe, but kind of things are getting stricter. So we cannot guarantee going forward you'd be able to undertake that 2-year home rule in, say, France or Germany. So we're advising people, if you want to live full time, if you want to move to the States and stay in the States forever, Fulbright probably is not for you. And when you go to the States, you will have a J1 Pacific Fulbright visa. It will say in your passport in that visa regarding the 2-year home rule.
And having gone through the entire process of immigration in the United States myself, I can tell you they're very, very strict. So don't leave anything out. Don't say that you don't have that and you do have it. I mean, if you lie on your application, you will be found out. And immigration is very, very strict. It's not like here in Ireland. It's very, very strict in America.
A lot of scholar awards.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there's so many scholar questions, and I'd love to see a few more student awards. So we really urge people to write in the queries box there, and just let anyone know if there's any potential FLTAs on the call that your application must be submitted entirely through English. So your English language CV and essays, purely because our colleagues in the US need to be able to read it as well.
There's a question there, what weighting do extracurricular excellence or high level voluntary work generally have? They're very heavily weighted, especially when you go, if you're successful with the application and you're going to be interviewed, that's where that's going to be really, really, it's going to do you great, you're going to have a lot to say about that. So I would certainly mention all of that as well on the application.
Is the 2-year home rule satisfied if you lived in the UK for 2 years after your Fulbright award? The UK is no longer part of the European Union. So
it's called Brexit. It's called Brexit.
Is it okay to highlight what you do outside academia in the CV? A similar question. Yes, please do highlight not just your academic. Please highlight, like Anthony was saying, all the volunteer and charity work you do. And also in your application, we don't want people to kind of go to the States and disappear into a lab or a classroom. We do want people kind of working for the greater good who are going to return to Ireland after the Fulbright Award and get involved with the commission, with the Irish Fulbright Alumni Association and the Ireland United States Alumni Association as well. So it's all about giving back. So please do list your other interests and what else you want to do outside the lab or the classroom when you're in the US.
And there's a question there about being specific about a semester you'd like to opt for. Well, the way it works is, as I said at the beginning, August 31st, 2022 was our launch this year. Next year, it'll be similar. I'd say it'll be August 31st, 2023. then the application slows in October. Most of our scholars are leaving, they've already left or they're going to be leaving soon. So this all happened back in March of last year. Their offers were made and some of them are only leaving now. So in general, you're going to be leaving in autumn. You're going to be leaving Ireland in autumn to begin in the first month or second month of the year after.
My third level education and current PhD are outside Ireland, but in the EU. So I've not lived in Ireland for a good few years. Do I need to show evidence that I'm intending to return to Ireland after Fulbright? Does this have an impact on the application? So it is fine if you're an Irish citizen and you're based in Poland or some other EU country and you're studying there, that is fine. You're still eligible to apply through the Irish Fulbright Commission. However, the Fulbright Commission in Ireland is operating an exchange, a cultural and education exchange between the US and Ireland. Therefore, you must be intending to come back to Ireland and to bring that knowledge and information you've acquired in the US home to Ireland. So we would like to see that your plan is to ultimately return to Ireland and stay in Ireland and become an expert in your field in Ireland. Leadership is something that's hugely important in terms of Fulbright. We really do want to see leaders. We've had numerous Nobel laureates and prime ministers around the world apply for Fulbrights.
There's a question there about accommodation on 3 months budget. Basically, if you go for 3 months, Fulbright decides your budget, and then it's up to you to use that budget for living expenses, accommodation, etc., etc. In general, 3 months, you'll get a certain amount. If you're there 10 months, you'll probably get 3 times more than that. So basically, also depends on where you're going to be going. As I said earlier, if you're going somewhere like New York, that budget will be eaten up pretty quickly. There's a couple there for, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
For the Fulbright Student Award, does the Fulbright go for more typical academic roles like medical research, scientific research, the focus is more on lab work rather than the design matters for scholarship like an industrial design master's or architecture? That's really up to you, and we do welcome a wide range of fields. So I've met volcanologists and mathematicians. Like, it really is, if you go on our website and look at who our alumni are on Fulbright.ie, you'll see a wide range of fields. So it doesn't really matter what your field is because it's open to all disciplines. And please note, Fulbright is spelled Fulbright. Some people are writing Fulbright with 2 L's. So please note, if you're trying to email Anthony or myself or another member of the team, our emails are, say, paula.melvin@fulbright.ie. So if you put in 2 L's by mistake, or we won't get your email. And please note, Anthony and I are the awards team, and we're just kind of busy for the next 2 weeks. So we will strive to get back to you by email as soon as we can.
Yes, if we don't get back to you, it means we're extremely busy. And right now, as we're talking, there are people applying and their applications are in progress. So we're monitoring that, and we're not going to be getting back to people unless it's extremely specific. But up until the 27th of October, we're going to be inundated with actual applications that people are actually doing. So, and as I said, as Paula said, Fulbright is Fulbright. It's not Fullbrit. And if you send an email to that, it'll just bounce back. You won't get any response.
Is it okay to submit your PhD thesis while you're away on a Fulbright Student Award? Yes, it actually is. You're able to be over in the States and submit your Fulbright Student Award. However, generally, typically, people who are doing a Fulbright and a PhD in Ireland, they generally go during their second or third year of, say, a 4-year PhD. They generally spend their first year and the final year of their PhD in Ireland, and they complete part of their PhD in the States during one of those middle years. Please note, students generally go to do a master's or a PhD. Most do part of their PhD, but you can actually receive an award to do a full PhD in the States. However, if you're doing a full PhD in the States, Fulbright will fund the first year of a full PhD in the United States. And if you're doing a 2-year master's in the States, Fulbright will fund the first year of that 2-year master's.
There's a question there. I'm an Irish and I'm doing PhD in UK. Am I eligible for the student award? Yes, you are. There's another question there. Is it okay to have a hospital as the host? Yes, absolutely it is. I have 2 scholars going in January, and they will both be working at hospitals. The hospital will be their host. They will be doing research at the hospital. They'll be working with patients at the hospital. So yes, it is okay to have a hospital as a host.
If I've already previously traveled to the US on a J1 visa, would it still be possible to travel to the US with Fulbright? Yes, it will indeed. Now, because we really want this to be a meaningful cultural exchange between Ireland and the US, you're not able to undertake a Fulbright Award if you've had extensive recent experience of working and living in the US. So that means if you've lived in the US for, say, 5 out of 6 last years, you're not eligible. However, if you've gone on a J1 visa before, that is fine. And say if you've recently undertook a year living, say, on the East Coast, you can make a strong rationale for wanting to go to the West Coast, or Alaska or Hawaii. So it's only if you have really a lot of experience in the US, and also if you have an Irish passport and a US passport, you are not eligible. A change that was made this year to Fulbright Awards is Irish citizens, wherever they're living, bar the US, are eligible. However, EU citizens, so a French person who's lived in Ireland for the past 5 years or more, is eligible to apply to the Irish Commission. If you are someone that, say, is from Norway or Nigeria or China and you're based in Ireland and you're not eligible because you're not an EU or you're not here long enough, you may be eligible to apply through another commission. There's a lot of rules that are kind of the same across commissions and posts around the world. However, each commission has certain slightly different eligibility requirements. So if you're not eligible to the Fulbright Commission in Ireland, you should reach out to another country if you're a citizen of that country as well to see if you're eligible. But please note, you're only able to apply through one commission per year, and say you're only allowed to apply for one award. So say if you apply for through Ireland this year and are unsuccessful, you can apply to France next year if you so wish, but not both. And you may only apply to one award per year. So apply for a Chagas Award or like a Chagas Scholar Award, but then that means you cannot apply for Student Award or an FLTA Award. So that's really important to note.
Paula, would you better take that question at 128 regarding using Fulbright to fund a postdoc fellowship?
Yes. Is it okay to use Fulbright funding as part of another postdoc fellowship? Yes, it is. We're actually quite kind of open like that. A lot of people have received funding from the Irish Research Council. So the rest of the question is, i.e., if you have a salary from the postdoc fellowship, can you use Fulbright to supplement it? Our funding body is generally okay with this. Anthony and I can only speak on behalf of the Fulbright Commission. As a general rule, yes, that is fine. But if you are receiving other funding, can you just let us know? Generally, we are fine with it, but you would have to check in with your other source of funding. You need to be specific with the time or semester you'd like to opt for, e.g. autumn 23 or spring 24, or can this be flexible? For people only going for 3 or 4 months or short times, Anthony also manages the Tech Impact Awards, which can be as short as 2 weeks. There is some flexibility in regard to the time you go. We'd much rather you go during a time where there's a lot of people on campus. If you're going to a 3rd level institute, we want this to be a meaningful exchange, but there is a little bit of wiggle room. We tend to be as flexible as possible. Now, to be honest with you, it's happened a few times that, say, in particular for people who want to do masters and law degrees. So they may apply to the Fulbright Commission and we may phone them in March and say, you've been successful, congratulations. They may not get an offer until May from the host institution saying they've been accepted. And sometimes they may not get their first choice, but they may get their second choice, or their second choice may offer them a full scholarship and the first didn't, so they'll go with their second choice. But as a general rule, you should go for whatever was listed as your first choice in your application. However, we are flexible and we are supportive and we are here to help.
I think the questions have pretty much come to an end there. If there's any more, you can send them in, but in closing, as far as I'm aware, it's been pretty busy up until this week. So I reckon that there'll be a lot of applications being sent via the web portal from now until the morning of Thursday the 27th. But I just want to reiterate again, just to remind everybody, maybe you come on the call a bit late, that 4 p.m. is the deadline on the 27th, and there will be no exceptions to that. Otherwise, it makes a complete mockery of deadlines. So I wish you all the best of luck. I hope you all got a lot out of this webinar. We certainly did. I learned a lot. I'm sure Paula did as well. Again, we would suggest that you look further afield than the usual colleges, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia. I know they're great colleges, don't get me wrong, but it might be much more interesting to go somewhere like Alabama or Arkansas or Kansas or Iowa or Illinois or Hawaii. Just looking at some other questions here. What are the general competition ratios? I don't understand that question. Do you, Paula?
I think the person is asking us how many applications we receive every year. It really varies greatly. Like, say, for example, we may have a certain amount of people apply for a sponsor award like the EPA, but you must reach the certain bar. It's not like, oh, if you're the only person who applies for a certain sponsored award that you're automatically guaranteed to get it. Fulbrights are quite competitive, but depending on what award you're applying for, it'd be very misleading for us to say whatever percentage, because it varies widely. If you're applying for an all discipline student awards, you're kind of in competition with a wide range of people. So it can be very misleading. And that's the reason we're a bit shy about handing out the kind of figures. Also, it kind of varies year on year, the amount. We're impacted by global events and whatnot. So kind of varies year by year. But definitely visit Fulbright.ie for frequently asked questions, and also have a look at other videos like this. You may kind of garner a lot of information, and if there's something you're not sure of, having read the guidelines, please reach out to myself or Anthony.
Sorry, there's a question there about the YouTube channel and STEM applicants. There was a webinar that's up there already, isn't it, Paula? The webinar on STEM applicants.
On that, I'd actually just like to say huge thank you to Aoife Drynan, the communications officer, who is organizing all of these webinars, who's made my life and Anthony's life so much easier. So thank you to Aoife. I think Aoife has uploaded them all to YouTube diligently. So thank you, Aoife, for uploading all of them and for all her hard work on this. And we're getting a lot of thank yous. We are here to help. So thank you all so much for being on this webinar, unless there's a few last minute queries that are just about to come in.
And I'd like to also thank Aoife Drynan, our communications manager, who does a stellar job in organizing these and putting them up on YouTube. And we have a YouTube channel as well. So if you just go into the YouTube channel for Fulbright, Fulbright Ireland is the name of it. All of the webinars that were done up until today, this will be up there soon. It'll be up there probably tomorrow. All of them are there. So any questions you have will be answered through all those webinars. And we want to thank everybody for attending today. As Paula said, it's been very, very informative for everybody. Thank you.